Be intentional. Take action now. Welcome to the Humanscape podcast, where we help business leaders develop the cultural landscape for tomorrow's success. In a world that is wobbly, we're here to help you create a strong cultural foundation for your business. And it's all about bringing your values to life, elevating people to perform at their best, creating a strong strategic plan, and offering lifelong learning opportunities. Are you ready to bring work to life and life to work? We are. Let's talk. We're back with another episode of Humanscape podcast from HumanWorks 8. In a world that is constantly changing, it's essential for business leaders to understand how to bring work to life in their organizations and life to work for their people. I'm Shawn the thought catalyst with HumanWorks 8, and I'll be your host for today's conversation. And I'm excited to be co-hosting alongside Sarah Marshall from our team. In just a few minutes, you'll hear from our guests, Lori Richards and Cass Bergemann from Mueller Communications. We'll be talking about their cultural canvas, clear communication, being a human workplace, and nurturing the talent pipeline. In a Best Places to Work interview from last year, this team said the song Don't Stop Me Now by Queen best represented their organization's culture. Well, needless to say, we've got to get into that, and this episode is going to be filled with insights you don't want to miss. Sarah, how about introducing Cass and Lori?
Cass has been captivated by the news since childhood, one of the few 8-year-olds tuning in to meet the press. Her passion for politics, writing, and storytelling led her to pursue a career that blends them all. With experience across industries like insurance, financial services, energy, and agriculture, Cass specializes in building trust with teams, clients, and the media, crafting strategic, interconnected campaigns. She thrives on turning ideas into impactful stories and finding those aha moments with clients. Lori has been a leader at Mueller Communications for the past decade, serving as president and partner since 2015 and as co-CEO since 2020. With over 20 years in PR, Lori has built a deep commitment to Milwaukee and a passion for developing leaders. At the heart of her work is cultivating an exceptional team, fostering excellence and balance, and embracing the unpredictability of each day.
All right, let's jump in. Welcome, Lori. Welcome, Cass.
Thanks so much.
Hi.
Good to be here.
What's one thing from the bio that Sarah didn't mention that you're most proud of, either personally or professionally? What's something that's not in those words that you're really proud of here this morning?
I'm happy to jump in and start. And I think Cass is a tremendous example of one of the things I'm most proud of. But as a workplace, Mueller Communications really prides itself on being majority women here. And Sarah did mention the word balance when she talked a bit about one of the things that's sort of a passion for me, but it's not only trying, I think it's a never-ending quest to achieve it in one's personal life, but it's also to identify and make it possible to have a career where you can both be the best at what you do professionally, but the best at what you do in your home life as well. So that's something that we really, at least I am really personally passionate about, and I think you see come to life here at Mueller.
I love that, Lori. So a framework we use to get to know people, and we use it with organizations to encourage them to really understand their employees across all three parts of one's mind. And we like to use that just sort of as a get to know. And so let's start with one part of your mind, your cognitive part, your smarts, your intelligence. What's something that each of you are smart about, either in work or in life, that others may not be aware of?
Lori and I were joking that we could probably answer this better about each other than ourselves, but I would say that I feel like I have a high emotional EQ, and I know that that sometimes lends itself to being more intuitive based than just like school book smarts, but I really pride myself on being able to just kind of see people and meet them where they're at, just learn about them and make connections that way. But on more of a personal side, my husband and my 2 kids and I took a road trip last week through the southern part of the country, and I still know all of the lyrics to the Backstreet Boys and Salt and Peppa and like all of those good like 90s hip hop and R&B. And like my husband kept saying like, how does your brain remember all of these songs? Like I could identify the song within 3 seconds and I knew all the words, but I could not tell you what I ate for breakfast last week. So I don't know what that actually says about my brain.
I'm right there with you on that one.
All right. So if there's a name tune competition,
I'm there.
Lori, how about you?
So I would say the quick and simple answer is I'm a word nerd. I have always loved as I was growing up and thinking about how I took what I loved and what I was good at and channeled it into career. I've loved writing. I love reading. So I would say that's an area of traditionally defined smarts for me. But I think one thing that I'm really good at that has helped really fuel me professionally is identifying those connections. So whether it's connecting someone in different aspects of my life or two people in different aspects of my life who have something in common that maybe can benefit one another, or sometimes it's also making a connection. I love nothing more than when I work with clients that maybe aren't based in Wisconsin or aren't based in Milwaukee, and they'll say, tell me what's happening in your neck of the woods. What's new? What's different? What's relevant to me or my business that's happening in your world right now? And kind of making those connections come to life to help people achieve what they're looking to achieve. Those things are really fun for me, and I think I've gotten pretty good at them.
Let's go to their affect. You mentioned EQ already, and this is around how you feel about things, your personality, values, beliefs. And we're going to be talking about values. So let's talk about personal values. If I was working with either of you, what would be a personal value I would see come to light that motivates you, that drives you to take action? Lori, let's start with you.
I think you'll see a lot of this reflected in our cultural canvas as well, but it's not so much a personal value as maybe it's a value statement, but do the right thing has always been a statement that I've lived by. It's something that I professionally was really sort of a mantra of the founder of this company early on, but it's also just become a way of life, right? It's what do you do when no one's looking? Do you pick the hanger up off the floor when it falls in the store, right? Do you pick up the piece of trash and throw it in the trash can? It's just doing the right thing even when no one is looking. And I feel like that is a way of life that's contagious as well. When others see you doing it, they tend to follow along. So that's something that's really important to me. That's an important value.
And Cass, what's a thought?
I feel like I'm gravitating to the word kind. I think just treating people with kindness and respect is really important to me, especially as a young mom too, that's raising kids. Like that is kind of like the ethos of our family often is just like being kind and being nice are two different things. Like, and I really want my kids, and I feel like a lot of my interactions center around kindness to make sure that we're extending grace and meeting people where they're at with kind of that empathetic lens too.
I love that. And then the third part of the mind, we had you take an assessment we use to help organizations around that called the Colby assessment around your natural instincts. And that is really, if either of you have the freedom just to jump in and take action your way, where do you start? When you're working and you're in the zone or in the flow, what does that feel like to both of you? And Cass, what comes to mind when I ask you that around your natural instincts?
I think my natural instinct when a problem or a challenge comes around is, how have we gotten here? And I know that sometimes that frustrates people because I'm kind of like, how did we get here? What have we tried already? What, especially in a client relationship situation too, like have you had some conversations with the client? Are they just coming to us fresh? You know, what challenges are they experiencing that led them there? I like to know a little bit of the backstory before we start proposing things, because I want to make sure that I'm just coming at it from the right mindset and can put forward one of the better solutions, just kind of having that context.
Keep doing that. That's all about you're trying to put the pieces together in order to make it make sense and then clients well. And I can't wait to talk more with you about that natural instinct. It's so strong. And Lori, how about you? What do you do? How do you take action?
Shawn, it's such an interesting question. And actually, the Colby assessment was really fun, too, is because it was a tool that we used a decade or so ago in this agency. So to see how it's evolved and it reflects the evolution of an individual as well. And I would say what I see of myself right now and what I feel about how I handle situations like that is I like to have a 30,000-foot view. So I like to see the whole chessboard and be able to anticipate, okay, if I move this piece, then these three other things are going to happen. So whether it is projecting out workload for our team so it can help us from a staffing perspective or a marketing perspective, where do we need to be 3 months from now and 6 months from now? I need to have the big picture view. I can't take things day by day. To me, it's too frustrating and it's not planful enough. So that's typically how I approach a big problem.
You want to see that, get all that big picture information, and then you're able to sort of work within that really, really well. I bet then you can really tweak it and move around in it. Thank you both for going through sort of that three parts of the mind. It's really, really important. When we bring that up with clients and organizations, I think sometimes they look at one or two of those parts, but sometimes if you put all three together, it really gives that full picture of an individual. So it's good to get to know you both across all three parts of your mind. We also believe work and life is not separate. And one of you already said that today. And I know that's why we were so intrigued to talk with both of you, because your philosophy of this being human at Mueller Communications and that culture and people are just at the core. And Lori, I know you stepped into that co-CEO role during the pandemic. And that, I know that was a while ago, but that had to be an interesting challenge. But I think you mentioned you made a shift from like client focus, people focus. You sort of did a little bit of a shift during that. And then I know, Cass, you had years in different agencies and different places you've worked where they may not have genuinely prioritized people or look at people like as a whole people. Like we have lives, not just as professionals, but parents, caregivers, partners. So from both of your perspectives, what does a strong people first culture look like? And how do you keep that alive at Mueller?
Well, I'll start and take you back to the moment that you just referenced, Shawn, which is my kind of emerging into the co-CEO seat in 2020. And to your point, a wild ride, right? To have that sort of coincide with this pandemic and the shifts in work. Now, I do have to say, I've been blessed with amazing partners throughout different areas of my life, but one is my business partner and co-CEO here at Mueller Communications. One of the conversations that we had with each other as we were stepping into this role is we reflected on some of our work and work with clients, and we both had exposure to some incredibly successful human beings that in the boardroom or in the office, in the professional space, were lauded. And you could not argue that they weren't absolutely successful. But those same people, when you looked at other aspects of their life, you might argue were a little less successful, where they had families that were struggling or maybe kids that weren't thriving in a way that it was important to me and important to my business partners. So as we were emerging into that role, one of the sort of promises that we made each other was to say, okay, we're going to hold each other to the standard to say, if we aren't being the best human in our home capacity, we're going to call each other on it, because that is more, I could be the most successful communicator or business owner, but if I am not successful at home, I personally won't consider myself a success, and hold me to that. So that's a commitment that we've made to each other, and I think really has been a key and the strength in our partnership together. But it's also really been a core tenet to how we've led and what has resulted in sort of this human first capacity at the agency. So it even starts with things like we put the kids' conferences on our calendar. We put the kids' soccer practices visibly on our calendar, and we leave and we go to them. Because I think in too many cultures, parenting or being a successful parent isn't celebrated. So people sort of hide it. I've got an appointment. No, go to your kids' conference. That's the most important thing right now. So if they see the CEOs doing it at that level, people then know it's okay to do it at their level. So it's just a sort of a simple example, but one that I think is really powerful and important, that when you're leading in a culture like this, it's not just what you say, but it's also what you do. So we try really hard to make sure that we're also sort of living it out.
Lori, we tend to do the same thing. You'll see on my calendar today, I'm going to be stopping by and seeing my 94-year-old mother over lunch. So that is on my calendar and it's celebrated. A thought, Cass, anything else from what Lori said as far as how you bring that alive at Mueller?
Yeah, I would just say that what Lori's saying, Lori and James, they practice what they preach. Like they really live this out. Shawn, you alluded to, I spent 10 years at a different agency. Before that, I was working on Capitol Hill. Different environments, really different environments. And so when I was looking for a different job before I came to Miller, I was a young mom. I had a 4-year-old and a 1-year-old, and I really wanted to find a place that, if I needed to be away from my kids for 40 hours a week, like I want to make sure that I'm in a place that is supportive, fills my cup, helps me be the best practitioner, but also the best parent that I can be. And so I really think that this is something that Miller lives out strongly, not just for parents like us, but I mean, we have a staff that includes a lot of younger associates who are just out of college, and their priorities and their things are just as important too. So it might not be leaving for practice. It might be, making sure they can go to their summer volleyball league, or making sure that they can prioritize their mental health and go to their appointments and things like that. Like it's really something that I think we see just across the board, and just makes us a really tight and close-knit group.
I want to spend more time here because I've heard one employee describe Miller as the most human place they've ever worked. And well, how about that? I mean, any organization wants that on a piece of feedback. What an incredible testament to your culture and to the work that you're doing there. And you both used a phrase already. And so that's why I want to turn and come back to that phrase, because that intentional sort of focus is from this foundation of what you call your cultural canvas. And I would love you to share with listeners more about what is this cultural canvas, how it came to be, how it continues to shape how your team works, and how you work together.
Sure, Shawn. So I'll start with why we thought going through this exercise was so important. You mentioned at the top of the show and the introductions that I've been at Miller now more than 20 years. So from a professional standpoint, though I've dipped in different client environments, this is really the only professional environment that I've ever known. Granted, the culture has evolved over the 20 plus years that I've been here, but the story that one of our VPs likes to tell about how the cultural canvas came to be is the story of sort of a little anecdote about goldfish swimming in a goldfish bowl. And one fish turns to the other and says, "Hey, buddy, how's the water?" And the other one says, "What the heck is water?" And it's sort of like, I've been swimming in the water for such a long time and been surrounded by it. I can tell you what the culture is here, but I don't want it just to live in my head. It really needs to be intentional and be defined. So as we were starting to take a look, there's a number of senior members of our team here at Miller who've been here, again, a decade or two. And as we were starting to attract talent like Cass, it became really important to us to make sure the culture just wasn't the water we were surrounded by, but rather something that was really clearly defined, and that anyone, whether they've only been at Miller for 4 weeks or they've been at Miller for 14 years, could define and speak to the culture.
One of our VPs really helped spearhead this effort. And so it's a tool that they had found in through another couple of other organizations that have used it. It's really helpful. I mean, we work with we can call it what it is. Like, we've got a lot of type A people here, and that's a good thing. Like, that is the industry that we are in. And so I do think having this document helps because it outlines our values. It outlines the behaviors that we encourage, what we don't encourage, how we like to meet, how we give feedback. So it's something that helps put the words on paper so that their lived experiences through working here at Miller can kind of also coincide with this piece to say, like, oh yeah, if I get a document back and it's got edits, that doesn't mean that I'm dumb, or it doesn't mean that I didn't get it right. It just means that, we're a really collaborative environment, and we want to make sure that our work and our output is the best thing. So this feedback isn't a reflection of me as a person. It's reflective of how we view our work product.
You heard us talk about the cognitive part of the mind in today's 3 parts of the mind segment earlier in this episode. The only way to measure the cognitive part of one's mind is by taking the Kolbe A index. The Kolbe A isn't about personality or intelligence.
It's about you in the zone, you adding your best value, you at your most creative, how you get things done when you're free to be yourself. At HumanWorks 8, we use the Kolbe A as the foundation to our talent optimization work with clients to help individuals and teams get the right people in the right role, build confidence, strengthen relationships, and improve performance. Want to know your unique result? Take the Kolbe A Index and uncover how your mind naturally works for your best performance. Visit humanworks8.com/Kolbe, Kolbe, to learn more.
Cultural canvas is such a thoughtful way to define and reinforce what matters at Miller. I really like that. As you've put it into practice, what aspects have been the most impactful, or what's working really well about the cultural canvas right now?
Cass said something earlier, and I think it was really symbolic of this. And she said, there's a difference between nice and kind. And one of our key values that is really center of the cultural canvas is the idea, the concept of clear is kind. So it's about being communicative and being really clear with people. Sometimes I think when things don't go well or things could be improved, people feel like they're being more kind to just let it go and not address it and just move on to the next time. But this concept for us is about being clear, again, not being angry, not being spiteful, not being passive aggressive about something that didn't go well, but just being really clear in the spirit of being productive and moving things forward, because it's kinder for our colleagues to understand what needs to be improved on than it is to not give them that feedback at all. So we really try to embrace that concept. I feel like that's been really impactful for a lot of people to, again, not take feedback personally. To Cass's example as well, I think sometimes even we live in sort of a perfectionist culture, a perfectionist society where people see red lines on a document, for example, and think, oh my gosh, I failed or I've let someone down. And that's not it at all. In fact, we're here working collaboratively to put together the best product possible. And what it is a symbol of how powerful a collaborative team can be. It's not a symbol of one individual that failed.
Is there anything you do to help them practice or to initiate and give them some sort of energy to sort of try it out at Miller?
I would say we've really encouraged people to start small. It is really a scary thing. And Lori can attest, 3 years ago, I was not on the clear as kind train. It made me so uncomfortable and so nervous because I had come from cultures that were really Midwestern nice. Like, you didn't say anything. But then, like, think about all the feelings that, like, not knowing really what went wrong, or the fact that, like, something went to the client and it looked really different than how you turned it in. And, like, why did it change? And do they not trust me? You know, like, not addressing those things, it just creates all this mental churn and spiral. And so I think since we rolled out the cultural canvas and really kind of dug in on the clear is kind concept, we've practiced as a staff of how do we talk about bigger things? If it's a bigger client misstep, how do you bring everybody together on the team to just kind of look back, dissect what went wrong and figure out how to move forward? But also just like being intentional and supportive in those smaller moments too, to be like, this email went over to a client. I would make sure next time to do this, that, and the other thing instead. And just calling it out in the moment and providing that support in the moment is so incredibly impactful and builds a trustful relationship too with your team and your staff going forward.
I think it's important to note, clear is kind is not a Miller original. It is a Brene Brown concept that obviously we've looked into and really tried to make our own. For us, even just whether it's an in-person conversation or an email feedback, just saying, I'm going to give you some clear is kind feedback, even just sort of prefacing it that way, I feel like creates a safe environment for people where they're like, okay, I understand that this is a psychological safety moment. I'm not going to lose my job over this, but it's going to be a piece of constructive criticism that someone is giving me to help me be better. So it really is sort of a disclaimer when we say, okay, I'm going to, here comes a piece of clear as kind feedback, or I think we need to have a clear as kind conversation. People kind of understand that it's in line with that value, and they shouldn't see it as a threat, but really as an effort to make things better.
Right. Sometimes it's harder to give the feedback than it is to receive it too. can make you feel uncomfortable. So I love that you're instilling that confidence. And Cass, you said something that really stood out to me. It's in the moment. I think that's how, we say direct and kind, but it has to be in the moment. That the more time that passes, sort of the worse that it gets. So thanks for calling that out. I want to keep talking about that cultural canvas. It takes a lot of ongoing effort to keep that alive. So tell us more about the internal committees that you formed at Mueller to really keep the cultural canvas alive. I think those committees were a result of the engagement survey that was released a couple of years ago. So tell us a little bit more about that and what those committees are responsible for.
So we have a number of committees here at Mueller, one of which is a committee that is just focused on the cultural canvas itself. So it's a group, a cross-discipline, cross-functional group. We've got senior members of the team, more junior associates from the team, people that are both on more of our marketing side, one of our designers. So it's really a cross-disciplined group that comes together once a month. And we're really starting to put a little bit more of a strategic framework around that group's focus. But we are taking an intentional focus on the cultural canvas to see, it's been a couple years now since we've documented this. So we've evolved as a group since then. So we do want to see where we can make some strategic recommendations to strengthen and refine this, evolve it a little bit. One of the first things that we're going to do as a committee is to actually survey just the broader firm on a number of things just to see what feels right, what feels like where we might have evolved or might have changed a little bit, and some of the things that they gravitate to most through our values as well.
We also, in addition to committees, one of the things the committee is really helpful with is finding a way to make sure that these values are sort of omnipresent in the day-to-day at Mueller as well. So just to give a couple of examples, one, the values are very much integrated into quarterly and annual reviews of individuals. So one of the sections of our reviews is, what values did you practice the most this past year? What values could you focus on in the year ahead? And that's not only from the individual, but also integrate some peer feedback as well. Cass was really outstanding this year at demonstrating, the value of team, clear as kind, and balance, for example. So we try to integrate it at that level. We have an annual retreat every year that always has a values-based section that we talk about. Every month, we do kind of kudos submissions to the team. And just like at home when you were a kid, we print them out and we hang them on the fridge here at Mueller so everybody can see the good work that you did this past month or how your teammates congratulated you for that. Then we also give out a monthly award. We kind of pass it around the agency, and one person who is really emblematic of a certain value at Mueller. So we do try to make sure that it's not something that we just put on paper and talk about once a year, but we keep them alive through different practices each month.
We talk about that. The values have to be, I like your word, omnipresent, because I think that just makes, they're like the air you breathe in an organization. And I hear that in your response and how you're tying those in. With your growth, and I know you're growing and you will continue to grow, and this people first, I think one challenge sometimes organizations have is that, we've got this strong culture. When we bring somebody new into our organization, what's the best way to get them to understand, to integrate whatever word you might use? Can you give our listeners any thoughts when you bring in new talent to Mueller Communications? How do you get them integrated quickly, up to date, understanding how things work with this cultural canvas?
I would start by saying, even before we hire a new team member here at Mueller, cultural fit is probably the most important assessment that we make. We can teach people skills. We can teach people writing or project management, but to be a cultural fit is not necessarily something that's learned. It tends to be a bit more ingrained. So when we are evaluating potential team members, do we think they're going to fit within the culture, is probably the highest mark that we have. So I'd say it starts there. It really even starts before we bring people on. And then we have a really thoughtful process that even starts, again, before they step foot at Mueller. They get a welcome email from, our manager of people, and they get some background on the firm and our culture and our values. And Cass, you've gone through this process more recently than I have, so I'll let you speak to how it feels and how we try to kind of immerse people from even before their first day at Mueller.
Sure. I would add to that too. We also, once people are in the door, we have a number of different touch points for them throughout their first day, their first week, their first month. There are some obviously onboardings and trainings that we're doing, one of which actually is completely focused on the cultural canvas. So, what it means, how we live it out. But then, one of the other things that we actually haven't really talked about too much that is just so inherent in the Miller culture is just mentorship and just working together. So, one of the first things that a new hire has, they've got kind of an interim mentor where they can set up meetings on the calendar every week with this person to just ask those questions. You're trying to feel out a new workplace. Does everybody go to lunch right at noon? Or, I have a doctor's appointment. How do I navigate this with my schedule and my team? So things like that, to obviously bigger things about clients and the way we work. And do you chat feedback? Do you send feedback via email? How does our task management, project management system work? The questions that you can ask really run the gamut there, but it's really a supportive way for someone to understand how Miller works and how Miller operates, because it is different. Like, I have joked with James and Lori quite a bit that Miller's kind of a unicorn. Like, I wrote down on paper what I wanted my next job to be and how I wanted to be supported, and Miller really lives that out. But sometimes it feels like it's too good to be true, where it's like, when is the other shoe going to drop? Like, when are they going to be mad at me about making a mistake? And it's like, no, this isn't how we work. This isn't how we support each other. And to almost have someone to just look you in the eyes the first few weeks and be like, this is really how this goes. And you're like, yeah, welcome. You're here. Let's do good work together.
I love that. And you mentioned feedback. And I think that's a challenge a lot of organizations when they're trying to evolve culture or see how their teams and employees are feeling about the culture, whether to do a survey, whether to have focus, how do you do that? Have you found any ways that have worked well at Miller to continually get feedback or to hear from everybody at all levels about the culture, or what somebody even wants next in the culture?
We have both the formal and informal means in place. At least I'd like to think so, right? So we have, from a formal perspective, a mentoring program. We use an HR tool called Lattice, where you can enter feedback about any one of your team members. Again, we have a very robust 360 review process when we go through each employee, especially new employees, get reviewed at 3, 6, and 12 months. And then you move into an annual review cycle as well. So trying to really up the amount of feedback you get, especially your first year here at Miller. But then there are the informal touch points as well that I think are just as, if not more important. So every Wednesday, we have what we call Miller Midweek. So it's a lunch meeting. We rotate among the staff and picking where we're going to order out lunch from. So we cater in lunch for the team. Sometimes we have a topic that we review, like a lunch and learn, but sometimes it's just really informal. So Cass and I may sit next to each other. I may sit next to the summer intern or the person who's just been at Miller for a week. So we have an opportunity just to chat and get to know each other a little bit more, again, build the trust, get to understand what makes each other tick. Those are all really important things. And then lastly, I would say one of our biggest metrics or measures, again, on the informal side, is just retention. We have ridiculously high retention, especially in agency industry. And that, of course, is sort of a lagging indicator, not a leading indicator. But for us, it's a really strong signal that people like it here. They like the culture. They're happy with the work that they do. And again, are feeling supported, are feeling safe in their professional environment.
Lori and Cass, I'm just curious. I think our listeners, from their standpoint, they're hearing all of these awesome things about Mueller Communications, about your leadership, Lori, and just about how the cultural canvas really comes to life. I'm curious because I know this has been a work in progress, and that you take very intentional action daily to make this culture what it is. I'm curious what you feel is an area of opportunity or growth for the team right now, or for the culture, something that like a goal that you've set forth for the organization from a culture, from a people standpoint, where maybe you're not meeting that right now.
When we look at growth and growth of the agency, whether it be ours or any business, I would agree with you that it is really difficult to continue to replicate quality when you're scaling at a rapid pace. So for us, I think that is always an ongoing goal, is to make sure that at every level we maintain. And when I say quality, that's sort of a generic term, but it's really the level of talent that we continue to pipeline and bring on board here at Mueller, which continues to be very high. But then it's also the quality of experience that they're getting at Mueller, whether it's their onboarding experience as a new employee, their ongoing mentoring experience, the touch points and check-ins that they have, again, with their project team leaders on a regular basis, because we feel like that directly reflects then the quality of work product that those individuals put out externally for clients, whether it is at the most junior levels, just accuracy, again, making sure everything's spell checked, making sure everything's accurate when it goes out the door, to at the more senior levels, making sure that those strategies and insights we're providing to clients are really sound. So I think they all sort of layer up or ladder up to one another, but it's just making sure that you take the time to do it right. I think that's at the core of maintaining quality, even as you grow.
I think you both have painted a canvas for our listeners today of some cultural successes and some things for them to think about really well when it comes to people and culture and how that really elevates a business. And it's the foundation. You're saying people first, and that's where everything starts. So in wrapping, I wanted just to highlight some things that I took notes on. There were certain things you said that I just want to highlight again for our listeners. And one, we talk about having ground rules sometimes at an organization, that we're all, no matter where you sit, there's some ground rules. And you set a ground rule that I don't see on a lot of organizations' lists, and I want to call it out. And that's, we need to hold one another accountable to just being human. How about that as a ground rule for life? Do you know what I'm saying? Whether that's at work or whether that's at life. And I think that's kind of an interesting twist on some of those ground rules that we talk about. And one of those is to be transparent about life. You're putting life right on your calendars. It's not all work on your calendars. And I mentioned that we do the same, and I think that's really an important thing to sort of live out in a very specific and living way on how to bring that to life. Another thing you called out is around culture, you have to be intentional. And you use the word, and I think this is a word that more organizations can sort of hold on to, is you have to define it. You can't just let it happen, but really to define it. And I think you're doing that very, very well and very specifically in Mueller. And I like that. And one way you've defined it is around that clear as kind and how you're set the stage with that. It's in the moment, giving that feedback and allowing that to happen. That's really a way to define it and then to show how it plays out in real life at work. And I like that a lot. And then I want to go back to you use the word omnipresent, and the culture has to be everywhere. And you, believe it or not, you came up with 3 R's, how you made it omnipresent at Mueller. And the 3 R's that I heard as far as touch points were, it's omnipresent in reviews, performance, it's omnipresent in retreats, and it's omnipresent in recognition, kudos, award. Just 3 areas where you can make sure the values and things are there. And then I want to highlight one other thing, and that is, we asked you this question. It's kind of tough. Is like, okay, how do you bring people on board and get them aligned with culture? And you said, Shawn, it's not about bringing them on board. It starts from moment one, at the beginning. It starts before they even walk in the space or on the Zoom call. We make sure we immerse in the culture during the process as we get to know people, as you both find the right talent for your organization. And I think that's a key for a lot of organizations. They may be lagging. Talking about lagging, they're doing it too late. It should start from moment one in every conversation. So I thank you both for spending some time with us today, talking about all the great things you're doing at Mueller. You're looking for unique and you're looking always for new talent. Where can people find you? What's the best way to connect with you, learn more about Mueller and the good work you're doing?
We always have new opportunities posted at our website, MuellerCommunications.com. I'm glad this is an audio medium, though, because it is Mueller, which is a little deceiving in Beer Town. So MuellerCommunications.com. We always love to get emails and inquiries about our company and our space. So don't be shy.
Thanks, Lori. Thanks, Cass. Thanks, Sarah, for joining me today. Thank you all. We look forward to you joining in the conversation next time. Remember to subscribe to the show wherever you get your podcasts and learn more at humanworks8.com/podcast. And if you want to know what I'm wondering about each week, subscribe to my Wondering Wednesday newsletter on LinkedIn. Reach out to us if you need a partner to navigate your humanscape or a speaker from our team who will inspire your people and challenge your leadership. It all starts in one moment. Let's bring work to life and life to work together. You got us.